Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So let me make sure I am up. Let me check my sound. I'm seeing green. Good. And my levels are good. And my mic is good. Perfect. So hope everyone is having a decent day, a good Thursday. This is my mom's birthday today, so I'm going to wish my mom a happy fucking birthday. Let's do that first. Second, I want to thank all the people who subscribe. I want to thank all the people who like my vids. Even if you dislike the vid, if you at the very least listen to my opinion on it, thank you very much. Not to mention the people who give super cash and the people who give Patreon. All of you guys are much appreciated. And just for one more run through, next week on Wednesday, I have Hard Bastard coming on to the show. He's going to be here at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Eastern Standard. And I have Grant Cameron. Grant Cameron is going to be an amazing show. Both shows are going to be amazing, but my own personal thing in this, I really want to talk to Grant Cameron. So that should be a damn good conversation also. So this conversation for today, I'm asking a question. Are we looking at a resurgence of the anti-war left? And is this the Bernie Sanders Gambit? That's what I'm going to call it, the Bernie Sanders Gambit. In 2016, we as a population, as the American public, was left with this immensely unenviable position of having the two most hated candidates who's ever run in our politics to be at the top of the ticket for president of the United States. Now, this was a horrendous choice that people had to make, and oftentimes those people were stuck with this idea of which one is worse. No hopes. Which one is worse? The thing that has stood out, though, of the entire process, meaning the presidential election and everything else, was the primary. An unknown senator from Vermont who called himself a socialist became somewhat of a phenomenon. Meaning people saw him as being above politics. They saw him as being earnest and trustworthy in a world of lying politicians. And to be fair, even though he's lost a little bit of his credibility working with Democrats, and even though a bit of the shine might have been taken off of him from our part of the sandbox, meaning the far left, he is still the most popular senator or the most popular politician in this country. Hasn't changed. Might have changed on the margins, but for all intents and purposes, he's still seen in those lenses. Now, I don't necessarily like Sanders pushing this Russia nonsense. Whatever his reasons for pushing it, I don't like that he's pushing it. I didn't necessarily like that he went towing water for Hillary Clinton. I don't necessarily like that he's putting his lot in with Democrats. But every so often, you would get a glimpse of the other Sanders. The Sanders that people swooned over and people out there rallied over, where 20, 30,000 people would show up into a park in order to listen to. You'd get a sense of that guy. And that guy is still there. This contest in 2020 is going to be fundamentally different. Meaning it's not going to be Sanders and Corey and Hillary Clinton. It's going to be multiple Democrats. They find Donald Trump as being a weak link. They think that he can be beaten by a ham sandwich, and you're going to get a lot of ham sandwiches that are going to be running in the race to run against Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders would not necessarily have the same luxuries that he had when he was running against Hillary Clinton. That's the point I'm making. Cory Booker, Christian Gillibrand, the neo-libs of the bunch have, and Kamala Harris, but I don't think she's done this, but those two have made the determination that they're not going to take corporate PAC money. Now, yeah, this is cut in a very legalistic terms, but they're saying we're not going to take corporate PAC money. Now, the reason they're doing this is for obvious reasons. For all intents and purposes, if they believe that they could get elected by taking massive amounts of cash and that the public would not bat an eye over them taking massive amounts of cash, they would take that massive amounts of cash. They don't believe that they can get through the primaries running the way that they ran. They find themselves to be weakened by the cash itself, meaning you're running in a Democratic primary, that money is a liability. They understand that the party, the base of the party, has shifted to the left. They understand that base is magnificently energized, and they also understand that Hillary Clinton was dramatically weakened by her being obsequious to cash. They're trying to hedge that off. And by hedging that off, they go with this idea of corporate PAC money. We're not taking corporate PAC money. They want to be able to line up with Sanders, who they assume is running for the presidency. Here's the catch with that. If you have other Democrats who are running in the race, and just like the last time when Sanders ran against Clinton, everything Sanders said, Clinton was essentially ate the position. I heard her give a speech, and I thought to myself, this woman sounds exactly like Bernie Sanders. Literally, this woman sounds exactly like Bernie Sanders. So, if they're trying to ape certain positions, how do you as Bernie Sanders distinguish yourself? Everyone knows that you don't take cash. Everyone knows it. Now, you've had these other Democrats who are trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, saying, hey, us too. Us too, you can trust us. We're not taking corporate PAC money either now. Trust us. Trust us. My name is Cory Booker. You can trust me. My name is Kamala Harris. You can trust me. My name is Christian Gillibrand. You can trust me. I'm here for the government. I'm here to help. And again, I don't think Kamala Harris fits into this. I think this is just Booker and Gillibrand. I'm just making the point that Sanders is going to have to be able to distinguish himself from the other bunch of Democrats. And those Democrats are trying to pull the wool over people's eyes by saying we're not going to take corporate PAC money. How do you distinguish yourself to a base that has moved further to the left? You yourself move further to the left. Meaning they don't necessarily have the political latitude that Sanders has. Sanders calls himself a socialist. In fact is, whatever position that these guys stick out, he can move further into the left. And it's very possible he may actually even believe those positions, meaning this may be his natural position. Sanders, over the past few weeks, have been putting out been making a big fuss about anti-war rhetoric. Now, this has been music to my ears. I watched him have a conversation, come out with Mike Lee, putting out a bill in order to stop the United States from assisting Saudi Arabia, murdering and killing people in Yemen. I thought to myself, oh my God, Sanders just winked at me. That was my feeling. Sanders just winked at me. And I know people joke me when I say stuff like that. But it's true. It's the person who I voted for. It's the person who I rallied for. It's the guy who I said, yes, that's the guy I'm voting for because that's the guy who I want to be president of the United States. It was the same guy. And in this case, he was beefing up his foreign policy bona fides. I'm going to show a bit of that speech. But my point in this is Sanders has come out again, anti-war in this rhetoric or in this vein. We need to revamp our position with Iran. Again, music to my ears. Him making the point that Saudi Arabia is not an ally of ours. This is not somebody who's helping our interests. They're literally out there murdering and killing Yemenis. And if there is anybody who we need to create some form of relationship with, that country would be Iran. We need to detour and change how we relate to Iran. I've heard someone else make note that they've heard Sanders talk about them overturning the Iranian government for BP oil, meaning he has an understanding of this stuff from a historical context. I like the fact that he's talking like this. I like that anti-war is on the agenda. I like that there's an actual politician who's looking into the camera, getting in front of a mic and saying, we need to change how we're doing things. What we're doing is grossly illegal. And not just grossly illegal, we shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Let's take a listen to Sanders' speech with Mike Lee, and then I'm going to read to you what he's just recently said about Iran and Yemen. Let's see.
Return home alive. And it goes without saying that every armed conflict that the United States of America is engaged in must be consistent with the Constitution of the United States and be lawful. Let us make no mistake about it. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution states in no uncertain terms that Congress shall have power to declare war. Congress shall have power to declare war. The Founding Fathers gave the power to declare war to Congress, the branch most accountable to the people. For far too long, Congress, under Democratic and Republican administrations, has abdicated its constitutional role in authorizing war. The time is long overdue for Congress to reassert its constitutional authority. And that is what Senators Lee, Senator Murphy, and I are doing with this privileged resolution that we are introducing.
By the way, This is music to my ears. This is absolute music to my ears. I love this idea of asserting this thing of something that's absolutely true that we completely forget. Congress is supposed to have the purse strings on this. Congress is supposed to be the team that declares war, not having the president go gallivanting around the globe with this kind of private military. Congress completely abdicates its responsibility to do this, and it hands over the reins to the president and allows the president to behave like he's a king, firing off missiles or going into one country after the next without getting any permission at all from Congress to do so. I like this idea that Sanders is asserting that this is our responsibility and we need to take that responsibility. A second point to this. People give Caitlin Johnston a hard time. You have a lot of batshit crazy people who give her a hard time. Mother Jones would be rolling in her grave right now. If you notice, he's working with Mike Lee. Mike Lee is a Republican. Mike Lee is a conservative Republican. If you agree with somebody on something, then it is perfectly okay to work with those people on the areas to which you agree with. It doesn't necessarily mean that you hug Nazis. It does mean that if two people together disagree with something, a particular issue, then it makes all the sense in the world for those people to work together to get rid of that particular issue. It does not mean that you're emboldening each and everything that takes place with the person. It does mean that you agree with them on that very specific point. I may disagree with Mike Lee on 90% of Mike Lee says, but if Mike Lee wants to get us out of that country, I want to work with Mike Lee to get us out of Yemen. I like this. Let's let him keep going. I'll do a little bit more before we read the other part.
Many Americans are unaware that the people of Yemen are suffering today in a devastating civil war, with Saudi Arabia and their allies on one side and Houthi rebels on the other. In November of this year, the United Nations Emergency Relief Coordinator said that Yemen was on the brink of, quote, the largest famine the world has seen for many decades, end quote. So far, at least 10,000 civilians have died and over 40,000 have been wounded in the war, and 3 million people have been displaced. Many Americans are also not aware that U.S. forces have been actively involved in support of the Saudis in this war, providing intelligence and aerial refueling of planes whose bombs have killed thousands of people and made this crisis far worse. We believe that as Congress has not declared war or authorized military force in this conflict, the United States' involvement in Yemen is unconstitutional and unauthorized, and U.S. military support of the Saudi coalition must end.
Yes. 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 Say things, Sanders. In this speech, I'm not going to go over the whole speech because I've said it. I've shown this once before. He also brings up Syria. He brings up the questionable legalities of Syria. I don't know what's questionable about it. He brings up the questionable legalities of Syria. The fact is, if you're going to make this argument that Yemen is illegal, then all of these wars become illegal. You may be able to make some justification for Iraq and Afghanistan. You cannot make any justification for Yemen or Somalia or Syria or any of these other nations that we're involved in. As soon as you argue one, the other ones fall down also. So yes, I love this line of argument. That's the first point. Him bringing up Syria is also music to my ears because I think we're inching ourselves into something of a larger conflict in that region of the globe. We do not need to be there. We need to pull our forces out. That is their sphere of influence. We would think it would be absolutely insane if Russia instigated itself into Mexico because of some kind of Mexican drug war or some kind of Mexican civil war. The United States and the Mexican government are working hand in hand, and Russia says, we're not leaving, we're staying here. You guys can go fuck yourselves. How would we respond to that? I'll tell you how we respond to it. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were willing to start a nuclear war for them being in Cuba. So we already know how the United States will respond to that situation. We look at the world in a particular way that doesn't take into account how the world sees things. We act as if the only thing that matters is us, that their perspective is less relevant or it doesn't necessarily matter. And we're shocked as shit by the negative consequences of things that happens around the globe when we're functioning with the globe in this way. This is something else that Bernie Sanders said about Iran. This is The Intercept. Bernie Sanders, Saudi Arabia is not an ally, and the United States should rethink its approach to Iran. He was in an interview with The Intercept. Saudi Arabia is not an ally of the United States, according to Bernie Sanders, the independent senator and former Democratic presidential hopeful. Sanders broke with the bipartisan consensus on Capitol Hill in an exclusive interview with The Intercept. The United States has long considered Saudi Arabia to be a loyal friend, supporter, and partner of the so-called war on terror. Sanders issued a scathing denunciation of the Gulf Kingdom, which has recently embarked on a new round of domestic repression. I consider Saudi Arabia to be an undemocratic country and has supported terrorism around the world. It has funded terrorism. They are not an ally of the United States. The Vermont senator accused the incredibly anti-democratic Saudis of continuing to fund madrasas and spreading an extremely radical Wahhabi doctrine in many countries around the globe. Now, this is true, by the way. Hillary Clinton herself has made note that this is something that they do, meaning spreading terrorism throughout the globe. It doesn't stop us from supporting that country or that regime. Let's keep going. They're fomenting a lot of hatred, he added. In June, Sanders joined 46 other senators in voting to try and block the sale of precision-guided munitions to Saudi Arabia. A Saudi-led coalition backed by the United States has been bombing Iranian-backed Houthi fighters in Yemen since 2015 and is accused of killing thousands of Yemeni children. Speaking to The Intercept, Sanders called for a rethink in terms of American foreign policy vis-a-vis Iran and Saudi Arabia. The senator suggested the United States should consider a pivot towards long-standing adversary Iran and away from the traditional ally Saudi Arabia. The latter, he claimed, has played a very bad role internationally, but we have sided with him time and time again. And yet, Iran, which just held elections, Iran, whose young people really want to reach out to the West, we are continuing to put them down. Not just continuing to put them down, trying to pull apart the deal itself in order to have this kind of war or some kind of conflict with that country. Sanders said he had legitimate concerns about Iran's foreign policy, but wanted a more even-handed approach from the United States between the Iran-Saudi conflict. Now, the interesting part here is Sanders understands foreign policy on this. He understands the significance in the sense of political, I guess you could say, incentives in the way that people behave. There's certain things that he can't necessarily say, meaning the larger context he can't necessarily give because the American public is not familiar with people giving a larger context. They're only familiar with these kind of narratives that the media gives of anything that we're doing around the world is good because by virtue of it being the United States. Anything that he says has to be couched in the understanding that people currently have of politics, meaning from the perspective of the United States. Him having a larger understanding of the foreign policy in this is great, but it has to be titrated to the American public. That's what I'm trying to get at. What he's saying, though, is absolutely right. We've allied ourselves with Saudi Arabia with this idea of this oil for security pledge that goes back to like the 40s. This has not served us well. And these guys have been pushing terrorism throughout that region of the globe, not to mention the pages that were listed showing that these guys had involvement into the 9/11 strikes. Those people were Saudis. Those people weren't Iraqis. So let's be honest about that. Let's keep going. There's a little bit more to this that I want to review. In a wide-ranging interview ahead of a set-piece speech on foreign policy in Fulton, Missouri on Thursday morning, the independent senator said the United States is complicit in Israel's occupation of Palestinian territories and say he would be willing to consider voting to cut United States aid to the Jewish state. He also offered tentative support for a face-to-face meeting with President Donald Trump and North Korea's Kim Jong-un, described United States drone strikes against innocent civilians as one of the root causes of terrorism, and called for a re-examination of United States foreign policy of unilateralism. Is this the Bernie Sanders gambit? Is this the Bernie Sanders gambit? Is this the resurgence of the anti-war left? Meaning, does Sanders look for a way to distinguish himself on the left? And in trying to distinguish himself on the left, he understands that, and again, this may be his natural bearing that he didn't necessarily think would fly in the first place, but realizes he has the political latitude right now to be able to pull it off, that he moves to the left. He has a base of supporters who love him to move to the left, who are already in this camp of being anti-war. even among regular Democrats, I'm not talking about politicians, I'm talking about Democratic voters, people who voted for Hillary Clinton supporters, those people also, at the very least, if you give them the option of somebody who's not a war hawk, will choose the person who's not a warmonger. Now, that's assuming they don't have any other biases associated with Sanders. But what he's saying makes perfect sense. You have Mike Lee, who's supposed to be a conservative Republican. Are you telling me that you won't necessarily get some Republicans who fall in line with this particular idea of thinking of saying, yeah, we need to stop murdering these people abroad. We need to get out of these countries. He's even bringing up the rail of American politics of Israel and Palestine, something that nobody does. Do you realize that Chuck Schumer is out there now talking about the reason that there's conflict in the Middle East with Israel and Palestine is because Palestinians don't accept the Torah as the Bible, as the Word of God? And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Kamala Harris is out there pandering to AIPAC in one of her other tweets saying it was commiserate with Hillary Clinton keeping hot sauce in her purse. It was one of those type of panderings where you're like, oh, that's just nasty and gross and pretty stupid to even say. Of everybody, Sanders is literally saying we need to have a conversation on what's taking place in other parts of the world, particularly our behavior in other parts in the world and how that instigates the negative impacts or the negative repercussions that reverberates outward. Going so far as to make the point that drone strikes against innocent civilians is one of the root causes of terrorism, and is calling for a re-examination of America's unilateralism. One or two things is true. Either he's doing this purely for political effect or he believes it. And let's be honest, it could be some combination of both. Either way, my argument here is he is politically incentivized to do it because he needs to distinguish himself on the left. And fact is, anti-war gets the left wet every time. Catch is, does he believe it? And I think that's what it boils down to. Does he actually believe it? They get into Donald Trump. They're asking about his tendencies. He says, well, I'll read it. Right here. Asked if he agreed with ESPN's Jamel Hill, and The Atlantic's Ta-Nehisi Coates, who have both called Donald Trump a white supremacist. Sanders said he preferred to use the term racist to describe the president. I think Donald Trump has strong racist tendencies, he said. And I say that's not because of his absurd and horrific remarks on Charlottesville, but because when you lead the effort to try to delegitimize the first African-American president in our history, I think that's racist. When you argue about Central Park's 5, I think that's racist. So I think to say that it's fair that he has strong racist tendencies. The wild part about this is people always bitch at me when I say something similar. I've made the point that, yeah, I think he's racist. It is what it is. Now, I've said that for similar reasons. If you're telling me that most Mexicans are rapists and drug dealers, then I'm stuck with this reality of, why does this person believe that most Mexicans are rapists and drug dealers? This is so far away from the truth. Why does this person believe this? What is the thing that's on this person's consciousness to get this person to come to this erroneous conclusion? What other conclusion am I going to come to? So yeah, if you ask me about it, yeah, my first thought is, yeah, I think he's racist. That being said, this is kind of besides the point. The Bernie Sanders gambit, moving to the left, which is what we wanted to do anyway. The people in the sandbox are not on board for war. The people in the sandbox is not on board for the conflicts. The people in the sandbox want a revamping of American foreign policy, particularly with our policy towards Israel and the policy towards Saudi Arabia. This is news to my ears, or this is welcome news to my ears. So let's see what the audience thinks about this. But let's see what's taking place. I'm curious on what people are going to say about this. Let's see. Brandon Wilson, paid to play and you can destroy Yemen too. Arcanite 13. Jamal, what do you call the era we're in? I like the second Gilded Age. The second Gilded Age sounds about right. Sounds damn sure about right. The Dutch guy. Luckily, my country, the Netherlands, has put weapons embargo on Saudi Arabia. We're the first to do so. Unfortunately, we needed oil, and so we made an agreement that we would give them guns and weapons and security if they gave us oil, and they kept that oil flowing. That was the deal that we made, if I'm not mistaken, FDR. Whatever his gambit, it is proven that he allows himself to be kneecapped. That's true. As far as Israel-Palestine, it is not controversial or off the rails as you seem to think. It's a global discussion now. It's always been a global discussion. The question is, what's the discussion here in the United States? It has never been a discussion in the United States. Never. When Bernie Sanders was on that debate stage and he brought up the Israel-Palestine thing, that shit was mind-blowing. It's not something that's talked about in American politics. The leader of the Democratic Party is out there bashing Palestinians with this kind of weird rhetoric that the reason there's a conflict is because they don't believe in their Bible. I mean, come on. I'm trying to give you this idea of where the country is from the standpoint of the politicians who are in office versus where everyone else is. Yes, the rest of the world has a conversation about Israel and Palestine. The political establishment in Washington does not. This is different rhetoric. Troy O'Fallon. I just think Bernie is damaged goods politically speaking. He's kind of a lame duck. I don't think he's a lame duck. I think he's okay. Personally, I love this. I love this rhetoric. Schumer was full Zionist at AIPAC, J. Scott. Yeah, he was. Did you see that shit? I was reading some of the tweets from that, and you're reading it like, what the fuck? I mean, it's so over the top. Like how... I'm always amazed that they allow the United States to have any position at all in coming to some kind of resolution between these things. Clearly, we don't have an even hand in this. We've never had an even hand in this particular debate or this trying to come up with a peace deal. We've always been clearly on one side of this equation. So how can you ever come to some resolution when the person who's talking about doing the bartering in this is clearly on the side of one of the other people? I mean, shit, man. We give them billions of dollars a year. Yeah, Chuck Schumer went full batshit crazy at the AIPAC thing. Agreed. Troy Fallon, hey, if I'm wrong about Bernie, I'm happy to be wrong. Troy, I don't know if you're wrong. That's the problem, man. I don't know if you're wrong. You could absolutely be right. This could all be a gambit. He could possibly be a lame duck. What I would say to you is, our perspective of this from the left is not necessarily indicative of how everyone else sees him. So keep that in mind. I would say definitely keep that in mind. I often have to temper how I see this stuff because I realize that I'm in one section of the sandbox, not necessarily being able to see the entirety of the whole thing. So I don't know how the rest of the country sees him other than the polls that show that he's still the most popular senator in the country. How would that translate into the next election cycle? Your guess is as good as mine. You could absolutely be right about the lame duck thing. I don't know. But that being said, I do like this rhetoric. I do like the rhetoric. Absolutely like it. Garnome, incorrect Jamal. Israel has been a discussion in the United States for decades, and yes, it's talked about in Washington. It's just framed in the media. Yes, Israel has been a discussion for decades. No, Palestine being in this kind of where people are taking the perspective of the Palestinians. That has never been in the media. I mean, and if you know it's been talked about in Washington, how can you know if it wasn't necessarily put in the media? The conversation that typically takes place in Washington is not based on the perspective of the Palestinians. It's always taken from the perspective of Israelis. The conversation that Sanders is having right now is based on the perspective of the Palestinians. It is a reevaluation of our relationship, and that is a damn good thing. People had a collective shit fit when Obama declined to protect Israel, even in that resolution vote. If you were right, people would not have had a collective shit fit, nor would it have been controversial at all for Obama to not give them that particular vote or to pull that vote or not protect Israel in that sense. It was non-binding. It was only a condemnation. If you are right, nobody would have given two shits about it. Fact is, it was a big fucking deal because that's not the typical thing in Washington. Certainly not with the press. Des Phoenix. Bernie has his cons, not supporting BDS or Russiagate. But the fact is, he is the most pros of any politician. Let's not disqualify him for a few issues. Agreed. Brianna Wilson. I'm unsure what he really believes anymore. Yeah, agreed. Have you seen the interview where he talks about the United States doing regime change in Iran? He knows we do this stuff, yet he's pushing Russiagate. That's also true. Like, I don't know what he believes either. Why do you think I always phrase this stuff as questions? Like, it's very possible this could be a gambit. That's why I kind of call it a gambit. Is it true, or is he kind of pushing in this direction because he believes he needs to distinguish himself politically? Or does he actually believe it? Is this his natural bearing and his natural position, and for all intents and purposes, he's not able to express this because he didn't think the political climate would allow him to express this? I have no idea. I have no idea. And it's like in all of the issues of politics, you're always stuck with the thing of, is this person doing what this person said they're going to do? We don't know. What I do know is for the past 40 years, he's, for the most part, is stuck to his guns on a lot of this stuff. And if he's been consistent on some of it, but let me say it this way. Do I think he's more consistent than other politicians? Yes. Do I think all politicians have a certain amount of political influence in the way they go about their affairs? Yeah. I don't necessarily think he'd be pushing this Russia nonsense if it wasn't being pushed or if he wasn't being incentivized to do this. And yeah, again, like you said, he certainly knows his history on this. He understands the behavior that we've taken in other countries around the globe, either these regime changes or fomenting these wars in other countries. He certainly knows it. He certainly has context to understand that we instigate ourselves into multiple countries across the globe. He knows this. He takes a certain tack for the American public, who he, for all intents and purposes, believes does not know this. The reason why he started his speech off in the way that he did with Mike Lee is, Americans may not know, but we are in Saudi Arabia. Essentially, your media has been lying to you, and your media has not been giving you the full story about what's been happening abroad. I don't know if he believes it. Like, I said that poorly. Yes, he has a larger context from a historical standpoint. Me believing that he has a larger context from a historical standpoint makes it that much harder to hear him toe this Russia nonsense and push this stuff. By the same token, he's a politician. He's a politician. So it's like all that stuff gets a certain amount of, I would say this, though, of everybody, this is the first one in a very long time, meaning a major presidential candidate, a front-running presidential candidate, that has come out and put the United States foreign policy directly on the table, saying this needs to change, this needs to be updated. The question becomes, are the other Democrats, in order to gain some level of parity, going to do something similar? Not only will they do something similar, can they do something similar? Will they even be believed? Like, would you honestly believe any of the other Democrats coming out taking positions like this? This kind of anti-war position. I like it. I like it. I like it a lot. Log 66. There's a lot to be said for politicians who say what they mean what they say, and do what they say they're going to do. It is a lot to be said for it. It is a hell of a lot to be said for it. Unfortunately, it's not often that takes place. I think the thing that enamored people with Sanders in the first place was they saw him as being genuine. They took him as being genuine. They looked at him and said, this guy has been calling himself an actual socialist. This guy's been doing this for the past 30, 40 years. They believed him. They believed him. Part of me thinks that the reason why the Russiagate hits people further to the left more so, meaning it takes the polish off of them in a way, is because I think to some degree they also looked at him as something fundamentally different than a politician. And I think the reality of it is, oh yeah, he's also a politician. It's a letdown. It's this bursting of expectations of sorts. He's not above it all. He's a person. He's a politician. He's going to do things like other politicians. The only catch is, within that latitude, is he going to be further on the side of being full of it, or is he going to be further on the side of actually trying to stick to a particular principle? In my camp, I'm more on the side that he thinks he's trying to stick to a particular principle, while at the same token having to deal with political realities. So, that's my thought. D. Martin, Bernie grandstanding again. He's not grandstanding. Jaden White, no one cares about Russiagate. No, I don't care about Russiagate, but I don't think many people. They've been screaming about it in the media. The Democrats have been screaming about it. You might have 20, 30% of the public that really, really cares about it because those people think that Hillary lost because of the Russians. I don't think the overwhelming majority of the people said it. Check out the comment to Hillary Clinton Channel 4 video. I think you will enjoy it. Tunisian 20. Liquid Zero. Why isn't Israelgate a real thing? You know what, Liquid Zero? I thought the same thing. I thought the exact same thing. I thought, why isn't the Israelgate a thing and why isn't the Saudi-Gate a thing? This thing that these guys were putting all of this money into the campaign in order to get them to either alter, change, or tweak certain policies. Yeah, that seems to be a big deal. It's like if we're going to scream at the top of our lungs about Russia, how are we not screaming at the top of our lungs about these other countries instigating themselves into our politics? What the hell? How do you let one slide but not the other? It just seems wrong. Robert Pouquet Ray, now we're on Stormy Daniels Gate. Yeah, that's so fucking stupid. I didn't even cover that story. I think when it first came out, I thought it was kind of funny, like, oh, this is funny. A porn star is saying Donald Trump paid her money for it. I have to be honest, I have no interest in her going over the details of some disgusting night she had with Donald Trump. It's none of my business. I didn't want to know that for Hillary Clinton. For Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. I thought it was way above board to have that dress. It's between them. If Melania Trump, whatever her name is, wants to get into Donald Trump shit because he had an affair, that's between them two. I don't need to know about it. Like, yes, it's interesting. Yes, it's slightly comical. But come on. Just from a personal standpoint, would you really want the person you messed with to go to the newspaper and start telling them all these intimate details about the stuff that you guys were doing or talking about? Or it just seems kind of gross. That's all. Stephanie Tome. Another person was mentioning it during Jamal's stream last night. Bills fan 1970. That's going to be a long wait. Troy Fallon. Hey, I'll vote for Bernie, and I'll still call him out if I think he's screwing up. Troy Fallon, you should call him out if you think he's screwing up. You should. Look, accountability. It's not just allowing the person to do whatever the hell they want. Look at your other political actors. And this argument that Democrats make of you should vote for Hillary Clinton just because that person is not named Donald Trump. Does that really get you anywhere? Does being complicit in a vote get you anywhere? No, it doesn't. You should call out BS. If Bernie Sanders is pushing a Russiagate nonsense, Bernie Sanders should be called out for pushing that Russiagate BS. If he's supporting sanctions, he should be called out for supporting those sanctions. If he's supporting Hillary Clinton, he should be called out for supporting Clinton. No, Troy, I agree. It's not hero worship. It's this person is representing my interests. Let's keep it moving. Castero Bandits. Troy, same here, but Jamal and a lot of his followers sometimes seem like they're verging or puritanical. I don't think I'm puritanical. I don't think I'm puritanical. What am I supposed to say? Stuff that I don't particularly like that I'm okay with? No. If I try to keep it in context. I try to keep it in a larger context of where's my red line point. I haven't necessarily hit a red line point with Sanders. So just because I say I don't necessarily like something, me not liking something, is probably true. If he's doing something I don't like, what am I supposed to say? That I like it? That being said, I've never deviated from this. If Sanders runs again in 2020, Sanders is getting my vote. He hasn't done anything at this point where I'm like, okay, fuck this. I can't place that vote or I can't give them my support. I haven't seen it yet. So I don't necessarily think I'm puritanical on this, but yeah, if he's doing shit I don't like, I'm gonna call it out. Harlan St. Clair. I care about Russiagate because of the dangers and don't want the blowback this political tool can cause. You're talking about Trump? I imagine you're talking about Trump. I agree with you. He's a political tool. They haven't shown that there's a link between those things. That's the point where people kind of dismiss this. Not to mention we do the same fucking thing around the globe. Michael Parks. It's all about the petrodollar. In this case, yes. Whoa, here's the other thing, though. This is the other oddity or the other interesting point. The United States at some point is going to become one of the major producers of oil. In becoming the major producers of oil, you've, in some respects, untethered yourself from the Middle East. Meaning your military, your oil policy, untethering yourself from the Middle East. The further you get into this idea of green energy, the further you spur this idea of electric cars and all this other stuff, you undermine this idea of your reliance on the Middle East. It's possible that Sanders can take a position like this with this idea of we're having a green energy new deal. This green energy new deal is going to pry us away from Saudi Arabia that much more. Our energy policy is not going to be entirely reliant upon them in the same way that our energy policy is reliant upon that region of the world now. It's possible that his own strategy and plan in this allows him to be somewhat separate and distinct from the other politicians. That's fucking fascinating. I mean, ultimately you have this domestic policy being one of the drivers to changing militaristic foreign policy. It's decent. I like it. Arcanite 13. What's our plan when the petrodollar collapses? Chaos. The plan is chaos. All shit will fall apart. All shit will fall apart. D. Martin. Bernie condemns Trump for making Jerusalem the capital of Israel, but doesn't mention he signed the renewal of the Jerusalem Act in 1995 last year with 89 other senators. He also didn't necessarily mention that, if I'm not mistaken, one of these other bills came up, the military bill came up, and he pushed back on that last time it came up. Meaning, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't support that bill the first time this bill came up about Yemen and Saudi Arabia. So, yeah, he's evolving from a political standpoint. And again, I made the point before, I don't know if this is purely politics or if he fully believes it. Meaning, if this is this kind of gambit where he's pulling everybody to the left, forcing these guys to play a game of horse. All right, if you guys want to ape my positions, fine. You're not taking PAC money. Let's be anti-war. Let's do that. Follow me to this particular spot. Is Cory Booker and Christian Gillibrand and these other Democrats, they're going to get into the primaries. Are they going to follow him on the spot? In fact is, what I suspect is going to happen is the argument that they're going to have is on whether or not we should be bombing those other countries. They're not going to ape his position on this. I could be wrong. I would be shocked as shit if all of these guys line up on an anti-war front. I'd be shocked as shit. The distinction that they're probably going to draw here is we're creating a justification and the reason why we need to be in those countries and bomb in those countries, with Sanders sticking out the other side of this of saying we need to revamp how we go about our affairs around the world. And here's another thing. If he's talking about doing domestic spending, meaning green energy New Deal, can you do a green energy New Deal at the exact same time you're spending $1 trillion abroad? A little difficult to do. It's a little difficult to do. If I'm spending $1 trillion abroad, it's like, how do I make sure that everyone has access to healthcare, everyone has access to education when they want those things? How? Can I spend $1 trillion on military, killing and murdering people abroad, giving all of these corporate donations away, giving all these tax breaks, while at the same token, making sure that the domestic front is taken care of? You can't do both. This goes back to that old Martin Luther King speech when he was talking about the Vietnam War, making this argument that if we're willing to invest all of this money into bombing and killing people abroad, but we're not willing to take care of our forces at home, it's like, where's your moral high ground in this? You know, like, where's your moral core if you're willing to spend all this money on weapons that kill as opposed to actually seeing to the needs of the people in your country? It's like you can't do both. He has to take this policy to some degree. This is the only logical policy to take. It would be weird for him to come out with a militaristic policy and a domestic front policy. What did King say? The Great Society hit his head on the shores of Vietnam, something to that effect. So yeah. Brianna Wilson, the left, quote unquote left, are voting for more military spending and deregulating the banks. We need to be holding our lefty positions, feet to the fire, even Bernie. Agreed. Agreed. This is why I agree with Troy. I totally agree with you, Troy. If he's doing something that doesn't necessarily line up with your values, I don't see anything wrong at all with naming that. They're your values, after all. You either agree with it or don't. Yes, you keep context. Yes, you keep in mind the changes that have taken place with Sanders entering into the political sphere of the United States. You take all that stuff into account. But I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with saying, these are my values, these are my red lines. Just need context. Richard K. Learn MMT. The petrodollar is bullshit. The petrodollar is bullshit. Barbara Mercer. Just another round of test marketing for BS cooked up by the DC consultants. There is no Sanders clause. It's all marketing. Grow the fuck up. So he believes it's all political. I don't necessarily believe it's all political. So Bernie didn't vote for either of those and won a very few to speak against that. Bernie didn't vote for either of those and won a very few to speak against that. Yeah, it's few and far between when I hear somebody speak out about this stuff. So I love it. I love it. And by the way, whether he came to this position from a political standpoint or whether he came to this position because he actually believed it, I don't care. I don't care. I want the anti-war voices. I want people talking actively about not going into the country and redefining United States military foreign policy. I want to hear that. I like that. I want that to be the thing that people are talking about and that to be brought up for debate. I want it. Right now, the only thing that you have is one foreign policy. That's it. When Obama and Romney were in that debate, the military debate, it was one of the third debates, I think. There was no space between them two. Zero. If you ever go back and look at that debate, Mitt Romney, for all intents and purposes, just agreed with whatever Obama said in that particular meeting in that debate. I agree with Obama. The president did this. He tried to sound more hawkish, but that was just tone. Ultimately, he just, for all intents and purposes, agreed on what Obama was doing. There is little to no daylight between the things that Democrats and Republicans do with regards to foreign policy. There's not. They may find different reasons to go into countries, but they still go into those countries. Savet Slavoy. I agree we need less war. Unfortunately, we cannot have capitalism and not wage a pointless war somewhere. Agreed. If we drop capitalism, we can have zero motivation for military spending. Agreed. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Because if you have an incentive, it's one of those things like the environmental movements. So you have people who are protesting pipelines. That's great, you're protesting pipelines. But if there's $20 billion to be made putting that pipeline in, guess what? That pipeline is going in. It's like your issue here is not the pipeline itself. Your issue here is the incentives that push that pipeline to be built. If there's a dollar to be made, somebody's going to try to make that dollar. In this case, your issue is the system itself, not the individual aspects of the tentacles of that system. So, I agree with you, man. I agree with you. Yemen Bill is great. Brianna Wilson, the Yemen Bill is great. Ronald Donald. Tom, make your videos shorter. Keep them to 10-15 minutes so it's easy to follow your perspective on different topics. Harlan St. Clair, Brianna Wilson, I agree with you on Russiagate. It's too dangerous and it's been proven to be empty rhetoric. So far, I don't agree with him. Troy Fowler, hell, if we can't stop war, can we at least reduce it? I know, right? Can we ratchet it down a little bit? Can we not be batshit crazy in this regard? Yeah. At the very least, look, put it this way. The only way you would ever get to that point, meaning the only way you would ever get to the point of being able to even have the conversation about whether or not we should be in a country, is for us to not be in the country. Or at the very least for it to come up for conversation. If you don't have any of your people bringing it up, if the media never brings it up, if no one ever talks about it, it's like, how can you have a discussion with something that no one ever talks about? So, whether he's brought to this place for political reasons or whether he's brought to this place because he actually believes this and he wants to distinguish himself, I don't particularly care. I care what he does. I care what he's going to end up doing. That's what I care about. So, I like this idea that this is the conversation that's taking place. I like the idea that if these guys want to deal with this particular line of rhetoric, they're either going to have to address the rhetoric or ape the rhetoric. You have to respond to it. It's not something they can completely ignore. I like that this is coming up for talk or conversation. So fucking A. Fucking A. Troy Fallon, I'm a veteran and I want to see less war. Agreed. Garno, it's foolish to think that getting rid of capitalism would end war. Communists do resource and land grabs too. I think the point they're trying to make, Garden, is that the major drivers to that stuff, like, it's like, how do you incentivize somebody to go in and kill and murder? Also, communism is in response to the capitalistic system. It's not, it's like, it's like saying, would communists go to war if there was nothing for those guys to war with? I mean, you have a capitalistic system. The capitalistic system was in conflict with the communist system. Can you outright say that getting rid of capitalism gets rid of war? No, I don't think you can outright say it. People can come up with all sorts of systems. So you're right. I agree with that part. But is it a driver? Yes. If there's a buck to be made out of war, are they going to try to make that buck? The answer is yes. I think you're both right. I think the person who's saying, well, I guess you can't both be right. But you know what I mean. They're making a point that having a financial motive in this idea of war is one of the drivers of wars. And they're right. By the same token, just because you get rid of the financial driver for war doesn't necessarily mean that people can't come up with other drivers for war. It's like resource. So yeah, I agree. Ronald Donald, communism is not socialism. Communism is expansionary, just like capitalism. This is why socialists are the first people communists kill off when they came to power. The reformers. And it was, at that point, it was a civil war. We're getting this argument between communists and Soviets. Stalinist. Oh God, we'll get into the history off. Bernie showed his anti-war credibility by endorsing Hillary Clinton. Oh, you're a prick, D. Martin. Oh, that's funny and fucked up. It's funny and fucked up. Troy Fallon, check out Professor Wolf's podcast called Economic Update, in-depth explanation of Marx and the economy. Yes. That's actually a really good one. Yeah, that's a really good one. And Richard Wolff does make that point. The difference between... in fact, there's another guy. His name is Brian. He wrote the book on Stalin. It's a damn good book. It's a fucking awesome book. Where he goes into this kind of... the life and times of Stalin, the Russian Revolution, the changeover... in the sense of Stalin taking power and consolidating power and the way he consolidated power. Fucking amazing lectures. There's one with him and Slavoj Zizek, and there's one with him giving lectures by himself. Richard Wolff also has one where he's talking about Marx and communism. So the difference in socialisms and all this other stuff. Yeah, that stuff is fascinating, man. That stuff is fascinating. People like Stalin and Mao are not representative of socialism, but of authoritarian leftists. Yeah, and this is kind of the problem with these labels. It's hard to know what they mean. People have these different ideas in their heads of what they mean. It's like we're not talking about the same thing. Yappa. Haven't caught your live stream in a while, Jamal. Just getting up to speed with this conversation. Good interview with Lee Camp, by the way. Thank you, Yappa. I appreciate it. I was happy he came on. I had hit him up once before. I bugged the shit out of him until he came on. That sounds bad, but it's true. My wife was like, you're just shaming yourself, just giving your dignity away for Lee Camp. But no, I hit him up and I was like, hey, Lee, would you like to come on the show? I have a show, et cetera, et cetera. And he says, hit me back up and ask me later. I asked him later. And he sends back, he's like, yeah, that's okay. And I was like, motherfucker. Like, what happened? Did he see something he didn't like? What was it? And I think I waited for maybe a week or two and I hit him up again. And I was like, hey, are you open to coming on? If you ever want to give your side of the stuff about the Russian nonsense, just let me know. I wasn't going to push. I wasn't going to, And he was like, yeah, I'll come on. I was like, fucking A. Rob Lacone is badass. Yeah, Rob Lacone is cool too. I'm happy he came on too. He was nice. He's told me he's coming to Richmond. I think he said in June or July, something like that. I don't know if we're still going to be in Richmond at the time. My wife and I are talking about traveling the country, or traveling the world for a few months. But if we're still here, fuck yeah, I told him we'll take him out to a burger joint. We have an amazing burger joint in Richmond. It's grass-fed, humanely raised. I proposed to my wife at that burger joint. It's called Station 2. Station 2 is fucking amazing. We had a flash mob wedding proposal. My wife comes in, she's eating, and I've had some people from work, included the Bearded League of Virginia. The Bearded League of Virginia just so happened to be there on that particular day. And we're sitting there, we're eating, and they ring the bell. And when they ring the bell, everybody in the restaurant already knew. I had already been to the restaurant to talk to everybody before I went to pick her up. And the bell rings, Bruno Mars, I Think I Want to Marry You comes on, and everybody jumps up and starts dancing in the restaurant. You have like 40 people dancing just out of the blue. And after 30 seconds, the music stops and I propose. And there's a picture with her like eating a French fry or something like that. And she's looking around like, what the hell is going on? What am I supposed to be doing? So, but I was like, yeah, I'll take you out to a burger joint. The place is one of the best in Richmond. So, Badger Demon. What do you say? Capitalism is 17th century, socialism is 19th century. It's time for something relevant to the 21st century. That sounds like a political speech. I love that. Stephanie Tome. When did this happen? Jimmy has interviewed him a few times, if I remember correctly. When did what happen? What did I miss? I missed something. Dor talked about how he emailed Greenwald and he never replied because he was too scared. No. That's not true. Well, yes, it is. I know what you're talking about. Yes and no, but if somebody read that, they may not know what you meant. Initially, you're right. Dor said he contacted Glenn Greenwald. He said Glenn Greenwald responded. And Jimmy said he was slightly freaked out by this because he didn't want to feel like an asshole talking to Greenwald. Greenwald is a smart guy. And Jimmy always says these self-deprecating jokes about him being a nightclub comedian and all this other stuff. But that was years ago. I mean, at some point, Greenwald did come on the show. Jimmy interviewed him multiple times. So, yeah. I mean, he said it at one point, but he got over it, clearly. He clearly got over it. Harriet Fraud. She is fierce. Fierce. Harriet Fraud. I'll check her out. There's, what is that guy? What is that guy's name? He did a series, William Motham. God damn it, I can't remember his name. He has this awesome series on YouTube. I binge watched his catalog on that. He was talking about gaslighting, and he went through the detail of giving like detailed identifications of the various tactics. It's almost like if he was writing a book and he was writing out each of the things and giving examples of each of the things. It was fucking awesome. I need to find his name. He was really good. He was really, really good. Greenwald would destroy Jimmy in a debate. They weren't debating. There wasn't a debate. He was saying he was just kind of nervous to talk to him because Greenwald is bright. And yeah, Greenwald destroys most people in the debates he goes into with. I've seen him in a few. I've seen him with the debate with Lawrence O'Donnell, the guy that he eviscerated on The Intercept. Glenn is a lion, man. I've said it before. Glenn is a lion. Saw signs and bumper stickers the last few days. Trump equals tariffs equals jobs. So I wonder if his approval rating is way up. You know what's wild about that, though? One of the steel factories reopened. Did you see that? So one of the steel factories that was set to close is reopening its doors and rehiring back its staff. Apparently, it's going to take 3 or 4 months for them to reopen. But they realize with the tariffs coming into effect, there's going to be a shortage of steel. And there's going to be a demand for steel from the United States, in which case they want to be there to meet and supply that demand. The tariffs. I mean, the whole point of the tariff thing was to try to balance off the steel that's coming in from other countries. Will that have an effect? When George Bush passed something similar, apparently there were mass layoffs. So what would be the response for this one? Who the fuck knows? What I do know is I'm skeptical of all of these guys screaming at the top of their lungs about this like it's the worst thing in the world. And fact is, if you care about American industry and you actually do want to do something to try to protect American industry, if you're a Republican, you're kind of stuck with a problem. How do you protect American industry when you believe in this kind of open capitalistic system where you want the 1% to essentially dominate over everything else? I would imagine that the best thing that Trump can come up with is tariffs. So that's what you end up with, tariffs. Problem with tariffs is you're going to raise rates for everybody else, meaning the goods and things that you buy under normal circumstances are going to go up in price. Do you honestly believe that the companies that are buying these things are going to absorb the price, or do you believe they're going to transfer their price on to the consumer? They're going to transfer that price on to you. So this isn't me thinking it's good or bad or anywhere in between. I'm also just trying to explain what's going to take place because of it. I don't necessarily know if there's going to be job losses in the way people are saying. I do know that company is opening itself back up. I don't know if there's going to be layoffs. I don't know if companies are going to reopen themselves back up. I know the media is bitching out and having a shit fit about this, but the media has a shit fit about everything Donald Trump does. So I can't necessarily take what they're saying as being, the truth, objective opinion of this stuff. We will see. Brianna Wilson, Bernie needs to start a third party. Who said the DNC won't rig the primary against him again if he runs as a Democrat? Who said that too? Was it Jared Beck that said that? No, Ron. I think Ron Paclone said that. Like, if he runs again, he thinks they're gonna cheat him also. Yeah, a lot of people think that. I'm not above thinking it myself. Meaning, if he runs in that process, and they haven't gotten rid of, the super delegates, and they haven't, even under best scenario, they're rigging it by 40%. Haven't gotten rid of super delegates. Primaries are still closed in many of these states. It's like, come on. They rigged it once. Why do you believe they're not going to rig it again if there was no consequences for rigging it the first time? So, but yes, Bernie should start a third party. By the same token, it's like a 70-some-year-old man starting from scratch. Yeah, I don't know. Let me say it this way, though. For all intents and purposes, I would prefer him to start his own party. I really would. Tabitha Enriquez, so glad you're back, Jamal, out of lockdown. Who you telling? It's like out of Facebook, out of YouTube jail. Out of YouTube jail. I'll be voting Jill Stein again. Yeah, if Sanders loses, I'm voting Jill Stein too. I mean, that's assuming Jill Stein runs. We're assuming that Jill Stein is going to be in the race. We don't know if Jill Stein is going to be in the race. It's like we've taken her as a fixture in the presidential elections at this point. We really need something else, man. Like, there needs to be something that can express the will of the left. And right now, there's nothing that expresses that will in this country. And I still go with this idea of a solidarity of no. Like, until the left gets his shit together and says, we're done. We're done. We're no longer supporting people that aren't representing our interests. We have red lines. We have bright red lines that we're standing by. We're not voting for people. We're not supporting people who are not going to represent the interests that crosses those red lines. Until they get to that point, and until they hold this hope out that the Democratic Party is somehow going to change, nothing changes. It's the people with the capacity to leave that makes that party something different. So, yes, I too wish Sanders would leave the party and become something else. Yes, I wish that would have taken place early on at the end of that particular primary process. No, I wish he would not have toed this line with Russia. No, I wish he would not have given his undying support to Hillary Clinton. I wish a lot of stuff. Kind of besides the point. If he runs again, he's going to get my vote. He's a person. So, I don't think we'll be able to make the economics issue stick to Republicans in 2020. If their aim is 3% growth, then that's an achievable goal by then. Transfer of wealth doesn't kick in until 2020. Slevowith, yes, that's a good point. That's a damn good point. Democrats, because I don't think they realize, I mean, they're making this argument as if, oh, these guys transfer all this wealth to the top 1%. Oh, we're going to be able to use that to punch Republicans with. That doesn't really kick in until later. Like the catch of the tax deal, this is somewhat of a trickery, or it's tax trickery of sorts. Yes, they're giving somewhat of a tax cut now, but they're getting that money back. They're going to increase taxes on the poor and the middle class in order to pay for the tax cut that's going to the top 1%. At the end of the process, that rate is going to be like 80-something% of that money is going to the top 1%. They're putting over $1 trillion of debt on the back of the American public in order to give the top 1% additional cash. Now, Democrats think they're going to be able to run on that and make that stick. People aren't going to see that right off the bat. They're not going to see that for years later. And the wild part about that is they put Democrats in this weird position that either they're going to have to agree to a tax cut for the regular American people, meaning the middle class. Because understand what they did. They made the permanent tax cuts for the top 1% permanent. For everybody else, they expire. So Democrats are going to be in this weird situation of, are you going to drop taxes for the bottom 90% or for whatever that bottom percent is? Or are you going to let them expire and let those tax cuts go up? They're not going to let those tax cuts expire. They're not going to run on this idea that these guys got a tax increase. So more likely than not, they're probably going to pass legislation, join with Republicans and pass legislation to make sure those taxes don't go up. Once again, gutting the revenue that the federal government is getting. People may see a slight bump on their checks, meaning those people may not necessarily see what Democrats are saying. If you're going to run on this idea that these guys are giving the mass amounts of cash to the top 1%, people don't see that yet. So I don't necessarily know if that's going to be something they can hit them with in 2018 or 2020. But you never know. If the economy tanks, if it crashes, if the regulations that they're rolling back have some kind of deleterious effect on the economic health of others, if the tariffs that he's passing create some kind of job losses, yeah, then they'll be punished for that. They'll be punished for it. But if people don't see it, if they can't feel it, it's going to be somewhat of a non-issue. Skip Rock. I'm an original Bernie bro, and I've listened to what Jamal is saying here, and the only conclusion I can come to is to get on the Trump train. I think Jamal agrees. You do. Yeah, what the fuck ever. What the fuck ever. Yeah, that's a fail. That's a fail. That's Phoenix. Bob Romero, so he's too consistent for it to be an act. He voted the same way for decades. Troy Fallon, JT, another problem with Bernie running as a Democrat is that I don't want my money going to the Democratic Party. Yeah, that I agree with you on. I agree with you on that part. I don't want to do anything that's going to support that party. I agree with Troy. I absolutely agree. Acronite 13, a union party. I gotta be honest. I don't care if it's a union party. I don't care if it's a workers' party. I don't care if it's the People's Party, and I don't care what it is. I just wanted to represent certain interests. I wanted to be an avatar or vehicle for the left. That's all I care about. I'm not necessarily hung up on the name. Just don't call it Greens. And I don't mean this as a slight to Greens. It's just that Greens there's a certain propaganda that gets the image of the Greens that make you guys look like hippies. That's all. I don't care what you call it, though, other than that. I just wanted to work. And by the way, I don't want it to be a pressure party. I want it to actually be a real party. I want there to be a chance of it winning. So, all right, guys, I'm going to end this. I'm getting tired. I'm getting hungry. So, I want to thank everybody for showing. And yes, I am so happy that the channel is back. So, once again, thank you all for your support as it was down. It's absolutely appreciated. So, glad to be back. All right, guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, everyone.